Welcome to Exploring Chicago's Rivers, an interactive story map launch. My name is Chloe Gurin-Sands with the Metropolitan Planning Council. I'm our manager of health equity and planning. Super excited to see you all here today. I'm a panelist today as well as your MC. So we're really excited to show you our maps, talk about our projects and tools. But before we get started, we have a couple of housekeeping notes that we would like to cover. So next slide. So to make sure that we can all engage easily today, we're going to go over these few points. We have enabled the chat and the question and answer functions on Zoom. You can find both of those at the bottom portion of your screen. We do ask that you use the chat box throughout the session to share your thoughts, get the attention of our events staff or my attention about something. And then we also really encourage you to use that question and answer function for any questions that you want answered so that we can easily see them. They go to a different portion for us to see. We also want to note that you saw that this event is being recorded. We are going to share the link out after this event so that anybody can watch it, and then we'll share resources and any information that is shared via the chat as well that our panelists talk about. So keep an eye out for that after the event. As we begin our program today, I want to acknowledge that the rivers and land that we're talking about today were stolen from the Potawatomi, Maiamia, Peoria, and Kickapoo people, among other Indigenous nations. These nations built vibrant communities along our waterways and are continuing to shape the present and future of our rivers, and are involved in many and all of the projects that we're talking about. So today, you're going to hear from partners that are using maps and visual tools to tell the stories of Chicago's rivers coming to life. I'll share some background about our great rivers. Then you'll hear from our moderators, Laura Barcusen and Lillian Holden from Open Lands, who will share about the African American Heritage Water Trail map and Community Assets map. Then Carson Poole with the North River Commission, Alex Perez with Active Transportation Alliance, and I will share more about rivers projects, story maps, and visual tools. You can learn more about each of our speakers, and their full bios will be provided in the link that will be in the chat. So our great rivers, we have three amazing rivers here in Chicago. In 2016, MPC, the Chicago Mayor's Office, Friends of the Chicago River, and a multitude of other partners released the Our Great Rivers vision, a vision for Chicago's three rivers, the Des Plaines, the Chicago River, and the Calumet River, which actually is the Little Calumet, the Calumet River, and Lake Calumet. We talked to over 6,000 people through focus groups, on-the-ground activities, town halls, and surveys. And what we heard was very clear. Chicago's river system, next slide, needs to balance being recreationally inviting, economically productive, and healthy and thriving habitat for all things living, including animals, plants, and of course, us humans. Since the vision was released in 2016, next slide, the Chicago Community Trust has funded 19 transformative activation, planning, and policy projects along the rivers. These projects have resulted in over 130 partners joining an extended network of river advocates and have led to real physical improvements and policy changes that we are seeing play out before our eyes. Over 1.5 million additional dollars of investment has been leveraged for our rivers resulting from these projects. The Metropolitan Planning Council has been providing technical advocacy and support for the Our Great Rivers projects since 2017, and we were inspired by members of this network who you'll be hearing from today to create a story map that highlights all of these projects in an exciting way and inspire all of you and our other partners to travel across our city and get out on our rivers. I will now pass it over to Laura and Lillian from Open Lands, who will share more about one of the great maps that inspired us, the African American Heritage Water Trail map.
Hi, I'm Laura Barcusen from Open Lands. Open Lands is a nonprofit based in downtown Chicago that protects open space and connects people to nature where they live. We protect the natural and open spaces of northeastern Illinois and the surrounding region to ensure cleaner air and water, protect the natural habitats and wildlife, and help balance and enrich people's lives. In our work to protect land and water, we strive to increase tree canopy, educate schools and engage communities, and advocate for policies that protect our natural areas. We are currently working hard with several community partners to increase access to the Little Calumet River. And my colleague Lillian is going to present 2 story maps that have resulted from this effort.
Well, thank you, Laura. So hi, everybody. My name is Lillian, and I'm the Education Outreach Coordinator, and I'll be talking about the African American Heritage Water Trail and the Community Assets Map. And just to note that both of these story maps were created with our community partners in mind. So in 2019, 2020, Open Lands and community partners worked to create a brochure and a story map of the trail. This is an image of our brochure. It's a little blurred. And the story map reflects what is found on the brochure. The stretch of the Little Calumet River and the banks between the Forest Reserve of Cook County's Bovian Woods and the village of Robbins has nationally significant history associated with it. We wanted to create a trail that would highlight these stories and sites important to communities in order to raise awareness and pride to the river. The water trail tells stories of the Underground Railroad, the birth of the environmental justice movement in Chicago, and the village of Robbins, where Tuskegee Airmen began their training. The water trail also raises awareness of the community assets, such as the local bike and wellness group, We Keep You Rolling, People for Community Recovery, the organization begun by Hazel Johnson, who started the movement for the environmental justice in Chicago, and the Robbins History Museum. The online story map picture presents these important stories, events, and initiatives, and shows sites where they occurred or occur. So I'll start to show the story map. All right, so this is the landing page of the story map. And as you scroll down, you'll learn more about what it covers and how to engage with paddling along the Little Calumet River. And so I wanted to just show three points that are a part of the African American Heritage Water Trail. And so you'll see that I'm able to navigate through, and I'll start with our point 10. So this is the site of the Ton Farm, which is an Underground Railroad safe house for freedom seekers on the bank of the Little Calumet River in the Golden Gate community. It was previously owned by Dutch immigrants John and Aunt Ton, and the site has recently been designed as a part of the National Park Services Network to Freedom. And then I'll also like to show you all site 6. Here we are. So site 6 is the Hazel Johnson Expressway. Hazel Johnson, who in the 1960s and 70s labeled the Augill Gardens neighborhood where she lived a toxic. She worked to hold polluters. And last but not least, I would also like to show you all the number 26.
We can hear you, Laura. Yep.
Oh, great. Thank you very much. All right. Thank you, Lily. So there's so much activity happening on our riverfronts. There's beautiful public art installations.
Looks like I lost connection. Can anyone hear me?
Oh, Lily, I'm sorry. Are you still speaking?
Hello?
Hi, Lillian. I think we lost you for a moment there.
Yeah, seems as so. I'll just start back. Oh, thank you, Teresa. Point 26. Okay. So I'll just verbalize 26 and I'll hop back on our PowerPoint. All right, so so the last point I showed was the Robbins Airport, and just want to state that that the individuals who trained at the Robbins Airport became a part of the Tuskegee Airmen, and so the water trail is one of the efforts to forge meaningful connections between the communities and the Little Calumet River. And so I'll just be heading back to the slides. And so our next one is the community assets map. And I'll be brief with this one for the sake of time. And so the community assets map covers the Riverdale Community Area number 54, which is one of Chicago's 77 official community areas, and is located along the Little Calumet River at the city's southern edge. And it is distinct from the village of Robbins. And it covers Altgeld Gardens, Golden Gate, Riverside Village, Pangea Lakes, Concordia Place neighborhoods, and these are all historically underserved communities. And so let's look at this community assets map, and I'll just speed through it. All right, so this is the landing page for the community assets map, and I'm using two strings, so that's why I'm looking up. So I'll just be scrolling down. You'll see the neighborhoods color coordinated, so that I mentioned. And then, so it covers topics like elected officials, and you'll see a list of elected officials, and this is the 9th Ward in green. And then we have our other wards in blue. And then it covers recreation. So divvy bike stations and where they're located. The black outline is the Riverdale Community Area number 54. And so as you scroll through this, you'll be able to see the needs and the needs and the wants of the community. Paddling and boating is another portion that is identified, and it is the colors identify experience level. And then parks and preserves and open space. So this is just to show the site of the town farm, community cultivated land, and the maintained path. Additional sites, you'll see sites, parks and preserves, both large and small and green. And then images of those sites where you can click and actually go to the website. And so there's also a wildlife that's been indicated and found, transportation, health and wellness resources, financial resources as well, so credit unions and banks, community support, so community organizations and childcare, learning resources. And that's pretty much the end of the community assets map. So I'll just hand this back off to Laura and stop sharing my screen. But thank you for your time.
Thank you, Lily. So there's so much activity happening on our riverfronts. Beautiful public art installations and activation events are often catching our eyes and the headlines, and rightfully so. And physical improvements lend themselves well to being featured on a map. And today we want to highlight 3 planning projects that you can find on MPC's map that are beginning to move towards reality. These, the reports accompanying these plans, they're not sitting on a shelf gathering dust. So first I would like to introduce Carson Poole of the North River Commission and pose the question. The North River Commission is working to revitalize a riverfront economic corridor. What kinds of improvements and investments in the river have you seen since starting your project?
Thank you, Laura. Yeah, we've really seen some tremendous investment within the last 5 years, and also just within the last 6 months for the Riverfront in our area. So as a little bit of background, the North River Commission is a nonprofit organization that serves Irving Park, Albany Park, and North Park on the northwest side of Chicago. And we really take a holistic approach to economic and community development. So we're the Albany Park Chamber of Commerce. We manage a special service area. We participate and support affordable housing development. We support public education and all the CPS schools in our service area. And I'm lucky enough to focus on both arts and culture and environment as aspects of community development, and environment, including everything from parks, trails, trees, and of course the river. And, you know, I personally think that in the area where we work, we have some of the best riverfront in all of Chicago. We have an incredible bounty of riverfront parks from Horner River, Legion, Eugene Field, Gompers Park. So what we've been really trying to think about is how we can leverage those riverfront parks and the river itself as an asset for the community. So as I said, we have really seen tremendous investment in this area in the last several years, including the removal of the last remaining dam on the Chicago River at the confluence between the North Branch of the river and the North Shore Channel, and millions of dollars in investment led by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in partnership with the Chicago Park District to improve the riverfront at Horner Park, River Park, and Legion Park. And so our project through Our Great Rivers is really trying to build on those investments that are already made, and use our neighborhood plan, use authentic community engagement and community and voice to leverage those investments, and then create amenities and access for the neighborhood that ultimately benefit the people who live in the community of Albany Park and North Park and Irving Park. So our focus thus far has been on the intersection of Lawrence Avenue, which is a main commercial corridor in Albany Park, and the river. And those two places come together at a park called Ronan Park, which is itself part of River Park. Ronan Park is also adjacent to a 1.5 acre urban agriculture site that includes a community garden and a farm. It's also the section of the Riverfront bike trail that connects the Manor Avenue Greenway to all trails going north. So it's a really complex site. And we brought, again, community planning and organization and community voice, building on our comprehensive neighborhood plan, which we did in CMAP and was published in 2018. So if you go to the next slide, we were really lucky that as part of this, we got to work with Perkins and Will and Omni Ecosystems as pro bono partners to help us develop site plans, renderings, and a story map to talk about the neighborhood, the planning context, kind of like how we got to this project, and then ultimately the vision for what we're hoping to achieve at this site. And the story map is a really powerful tool for that because, again, this is a complex site. There are a lot of uses. It's an important position in the neighborhood as the gateway to Lawrence Avenue, as the gateway to Albany Park, as part of the Riverfront bike trail. And so the story map helps to embed the planning vision within all of that rich context, so that it's not just, here are some renderings about something that we want to see on the riverfront, but why did we choose to do this, or why did what part of the community vision and part of the Great Rivers vision are we addressing when we make these suggested improvements. So again, North River Commission has been able to do the organizing, the advocacy, and the sort of community scale planning with partners. And because of this, the biggest investment, the Chicago Park District recently received over $7.5 million in funding from the city of Chicago for 4 projects in our service area, all riverfront projects, including $3.5 million for Ronan Park in that immediate area. So we're gonna have to update that additional investment number, Chloe, from the slide earlier in the presentation. So that money is going to go towards achieving the vision that was developed through our project, again, with local partners, as well as improvements to the paddling program at River Park, the paddling and ecology program, improvements to the riverfront at Northside College Prep, and improvements to Kiwanis Park, which is adjacent to Von Steuben High School. So collectively, over $7.5 million will be invested in community amenities, access, and improvements that help to bring the riverfront into more of a neighborhood amenity. And the river itself as a park, which is part of the Great Rivers vision, is not just envisioning the rivers as something that flows through our parks, but as part of our parks, as an integral part of our parks and our community. So we're really excited about where this is heading. There's now a park advisory council at River Park, which we helped to get started, so that community involvement is going to help to take this vision forward and make sure that the investment lands with context, and again, achieving community vision as well as a great rivers vision. Because I think, it's one thing to build infrastructure or to make ecological improvements, but to have community that's behind it and that has authentic buy-in and involvement is really one of the most important outcomes to come out of this project thus far.
Great, thank you, Carson. Next up, we have Alex Perez from Active Transportation Alliance. Active Transportation Alliance is stretching our imaginations for what pedestrian access could look like along the rivers. How will folks be able to access, enjoy, and connect with the rivers through the Chicago River Park project?
Hi, Laura. Thank you. As she mentioned, my name is Alex Perez. I am an advocacy manager at Active Transportation Alliance, and Active Trans is a nonprofit organization working to promote walking, biking, and public transit, making sure it's safe and equitable to get around the Chicagoland area. And with this project called the Chicago River Park, Active Trans has been working with Ross Barney architecture firm to help us with creating the site plan, helping us out with the concept renderings to create a vision for what the Chicago River Park could look like and create access and connectivity along Upper Wacker. So this is a project stretching along Upper Wacker as a continuation of the success of the Chicago River Walk in downtown, where we would like to see a little bit of the over-dedicated space that is allocated to cars and giving some of that space to people who are walking and biking along Upper Wacker. So part of the plan is to remove 1 or 2 lanes from the roadway to build out the River Park. And from this is taking out the lane that's closest to the sidewalk on the Chicago River. And from there, it's creating a 2-way bicycle path that will be protected as well with a buffer, so the cars don't get in the 2-way bicycle path. And then there's pretty much a buffer between the sidewalk and the driving lane with the bicycle path. So as I mentioned, it is an expansion. Kind of the idea of it was looking at the success of the Chicago River Walk in downtown and how to build on it to making sure that people who are walking and biking are accessing it safely. Because just from experience or people who work in downtown, just kind of already have a sense of how difficult it could be to bike on Upper Wacker or try to cross that intersection on Upper Wacker. And part of it too is to relieve congestion along the river's edge. It does get crowded along the Chicago River Walk if you're trying to bike. So making sure that the 2-way bike path is a dedicated space for people who want to bike, are biking on the bike path and not really competing with space on the river walk with people. Next slide. So this is just a brief overview of the project study area. So we are focusing on Upper Wacker primarily, and starting on Orleans Street, kind of the meeting point for the North Branch and the South Branch, and then it will stretch down to Columbus Drive, and then it'll be a downward ramp that will give you a connection to the Riverwalk and a connection to the lakefront as well. So this is a key amenity that will create access and safety for people who are walking and biking along Upper Wacker and create access to not just the Chicago River, but also the downtown area and the lakefront. And another thing to mention too is with the overly dedicated space for cars, much of Upper Wacker has around 7 car lanes, including traffic. So removing 1 travel lane, we don't see it being much of a difference just because of the traffic volumes. We have predicted that the number of lanes don't justify the amount of car traffic that is going on, especially during the pandemic, where a lot less people are driving into work or working from home. So it just provides a little bit more open space to create a vision of what the this area would look like if we could give more space to people who are walking and biking and not just cars. Next slide. So this is just a close-up of an intersection looking at Upper Wacker and Michigan. So besides the bicycle infrastructure component, there's also pedestrian safety being incorporated as well, including new crosswalks and even pedestrian islands that would keep people safe if they're trying to cross the intersection and they're kind of low on time. They could wait at the pedestrian island in the middle of the intersection and not have to worry about getting hit by a car or cars traveling fast. And as well as with the biking, there is kind of the markings are there to make it more visible when crossing through the intersection, as well as bike boxes to keep cyclists give a head start when the light turns, and as well as the addition of creating a no turn on red sign on Michigan. That way it'll keep the safety component there whenever cars are trying to make a right turn, making sure that collision is least amount of possible for people who are walking and biking on Michigan when it does get busy. And part of the vision going forward too is the crosswalks will be colored in. That way people or cars, whenever they're driving, are more visible when crossing. And there's a new crosswalk being planned out on section L, which is not a crosswalk right now. So if you're trying to cross on Michigan, you kind of have to go around on L to even get across on that side of the sidewalk. And this is kind of pretty much the big picture. These are still concept renderings. These are in kind of the final designs. We are still in communication with a lot of the stakeholders that we've had conversation with, including downtown organizations, downtown businesses, department agencies, and Alderman Riley. Alderman Riley has been supportive of this project when we first introduced to his office, and he's been supportive of it as well. So we're hoping with his support, this project could gain more momentum going forward and creating a vision where this becomes reality. And one thing I wanted to have last note of is that we are still working on the engagement process. It's still an ongoing thing, and we're having an event, in-person event at Bridgeport Museum along the Chicago River on September 13th during the lunchtime. So if people are interested in getting more engaged with this project and learning more, Active Trans and Royal Spartan Architects will be at that event during lunchtime to present about this project for people to gain more insight and how to be more engaged with it going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Next up, we have Chloe Guerin-Sands from Metropolitan Planning Council. And today, the Metropolitan Planning Council is launching the Explore Our Great Rivers Story Map. Can you tell us about this story map and how it fits in with the support MPC has been providing to our Great Rivers grantees?
Yeah, thanks so much, Laura, and thanks to Carson and Alex for sharing about your really exciting projects as well. So MPC has been providing technical and advocacy support for rivers initiatives for several years now. Part of this support is convening a cohort of all of the Our Great Rivers grantees, where they can share challenges, successes, expand their rivers networks, and work together. We also discuss shared priorities and advocate together for the kinds of system level changes and policies that will help support riverfront planning and activations across the city and region moving forward. To us, an important part of advocacy is telling the stories of who is doing these projects and why they're happening and why they're so important to the communities surrounding the projects. For 4 years, we've been doing a lot of that storytelling through publishing blog posts, writing mini reports. But after the success of the Our Great Rivers Chicago social media campaigns last year and this year, where we saw a lot of excitement about people sharing how they're getting out on our rivers, we wanted to use a more visual and compelling tool this year to start telling these stories. So this, along with the inspiration from the projects that you just heard about, led us to create the Explore Our Great Rivers story map. So to show a little bit more of the map, we can go to the next slide. So when you visit the map, you will see, just like with the other story maps, an actual map of where all of these projects are on our different rivers. And you'll be able to either just scroll through the site and see where all of the projects are, or click on any one point on the map to see more details. So if we go to the next slide, here you'll see we've clicked in on the South Branch Parks Framework Plan project. And for any project, when you click on it, you're able to zoom in on the map. Also, you'll be able to see pictures, videos that we have on there. You'll be able to link out to the lead organization's website and read more of a description about what that project is and what it's covering. So we're really hoping that this map will help you learn about a new project that you didn't know was happening, inspire you to go out and visit the site if there's a physical improvement that happened there, or read the plans and get involved with that if it's more so in the planning and advocacy phase. And all of the projects that you heard about today, as well as all of the projects that are part of that Rivers cohort network and more, are part of this map. So we really hope that you'll check it out. Thank you.
Thank you, Chloe. I now have some questions to ask the panelists. And my first question is actually directed towards Chloe. How do visual tools like a story map inspire action, collaboration, and investment? What's the goal of this method of information sharing and placemaking?
Thanks, and I would love, since Carson shared that news about us having to update our numbers on that, for you to jump in as well with how these kinds of tools have been helpful, and Alex as well, of course, if you have anything to add. So for us, again, with being able to tell those stories, being able to show images, pictures, just attaching that visual, really, we've seen it just excite funders and partners that the projects might have seemed a little bit, difficult to understand or a little bit abstract. This really adds that concrete layer for people to connect with a physical place, and seeing before and afters of what these locations have looked like when it's a physical improvement, seeing the inspiration of what something could look like when you have renderings. We've honestly just seen people get super excited and take it to the next level when we're able to show them an image like the ones that we saw today.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any comment on that question?
Yeah, again, just echo that, the sites are complex, right? Like the river is complex. The way that people interact with it is sort of layered. And it's really helpful to show that these projects don't come from nowhere, but are in fact, like very often the culmination of years of planning and investment. And to be able to tell that more complicated story and not, again, just show renderings to say, wouldn't it be cool if there was a pavilion at this riverfront site, but to say what different priorities and goals, both from the community or from the region or from funders, are being met by these proposals is super helpful, and a tool like Story Map can do that also, and it can live right online without you having to give that presentation all the time and sort of unearth all that complexity. It's as a standalone, is something that somebody can access at any point, regardless of if you're there or not, is super helpful.
Yeah, just echoing what everybody has said, Story Maps has been a great tool to just get the information out, making sure that it is interactive for people who want to be more engaged with such projects or multiple projects, to have that all in kind of one spot and kind of pinpoint like what projects they're interested in and how they want to learn more about it.
Great, thank you, everyone. And the next question I have is directed towards Alex. What or who inspired your project? Who led it and drove it forward? And what were some of the lessons learned in taking your project from the planning phase to implementation?
Yeah, great question. So kind of what led this project going forward, as I mentioned before, is the success of the Chicago Riverwalk. That was kind of our base model of like, if this could happen along the riverfront, why not expand it to making sure that it's not just a space solely on the Chicago Riverwalk, but it expands into Upper Wacker as well, where cars have space, not just on Upper Wacker, but Lower Wacker as well. So it's envisioning a space that's more dedicated to people and running with that vision to the public, where lots of people are taking their breaks along the Riverwalk. So let's expand it for people to have that space more visible and also more interactive, with new placemaking things happening along the Riverwalk as well.
Great, thank you. And Carson or Chloe, would you like to comment on that one?
I would just add for us, we have a comprehensive neighborhood plan that we developed in partnership with CMAP in 2018 that had a whole chapter focused on parks and riverfront and leveraging those as, they already are community assets, but how can we further leverage them for the benefit of the community? And so that plan and the intersection between that and the economic development section of our plan comes together again at Ronan Park, and this idea that that's the gateway to Albany Park. And so we were sort of like looking at both of those aspects and seeing if we could merge them into one project to create, physical improvements, placemaking along the river that becomes a community amenity, but that also hopefully has this co-benefit of driving interest and investment and attraction to Lawrence Avenue and to the businesses in Albany Park, which we know as the chamber need more foot traffic. So we're trying to, layer both of those goals on top of each other to do public space improvement that also has this subsequent goal of local economic development.
For our Great Rivers project and the Great Rivers Chicago initiative overall, a big part of that inspiration for the very beginnings of it was seeing how much of a collective investment and appreciation there is for the lakefront, and wanting to see that same attention turned towards what we felt like had the potential to be an amazing resource throughout the whole city, and just adding, those 150 plus miles of riverfront to places where people can access and interact with. So in going from the vision to starting to try to implement a lot of these projects and policies, I would say one of the biggest lessons was just starting to make that transition from what does it look like to have individual community level activations, which are great and needed to get that attention and start improving, but then starting to have this systemic conversation about, what are the policies, what are the planning nuts and bolts that we need to change in order to make this stuff happen at a larger scale, and, be able to share our management of our huge river system in a better way.
Great, thank you. I'm going to ask one more question and direct it at Carson, and then we'll switch to the audience questions. How can we utilize our urban waterways to drive connectivity and prosperity in all riverfront regions and neighborhoods?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, we think about it, we're trying to think about the river as a park, as public space, as a public amenity in the neighborhood, but also as an attractor for people to come to the region. We want, when people think about Albany Park, I want one of the things they think about is to be to the river, this beautiful riverfront that we have, this incredible asset that we have, this recreational gem, this thing to look at, and it is becoming that more and more, especially at River Park with the improvements to the riverbank. You see people sit out on the east bank of the River Park and watch the sunset, right? Like it is just becoming this focal point for the neighborhood, and that helps to drive interest and people. Hopefully, if we develop programming that's contextual to the neighborhood, those benefits can spill over to local businesses, to investment. As I mentioned at the top, we're involved in affordable housing development, public schools. So we're always trying to make linkages between our different program areas. So there's opportunities for education and enrichment for local school students, as well as for businesses to participate in programs or events that are happening at the parks. Or if you're coming to River Park to paddle in a park district kayak, maybe afterwards you're going to get lunch in Albany Park, right? So we're always trying to figure out if there's ways to maximize those co-benefits. And I think that as the river continues to improve ecologically and water quality improves, it will continue to be seen as this powerful asset, similar to being a lakefront community. You're going to want to be in a riverfront community because the riverfront's going to be fun and enjoyable, and it already is.
Great, thank you, Carson. I think I'm going to switch to the Q&A from the audience now, so that we don't miss anybody's questions. I think this first one is probably something that Chloe could answer. It's, what did the social media campaign comprise for the Great Rivers Project? It's really exciting to see tools like story maps being put up to use to make compiling a lot of information easy to navigate and easy to read.
Sure. So our social media campaigns were run primarily through Instagram, Facebook, and our newsletter outlets that we have. So we shared images and pictures from our different partner projects. All of our partners shared their own content as well, videos, pictures. And then we also encouraged individuals on our staff and just broader folks in our networks and across Chicago to share images of themselves out on the rivers, especially last summer during the earlier phases of the pandemic, to show how our rivers could be a great outdoor refuge. So we used the hashtag Great Rivers Chicago. So all of those posts would still be available if you want to go check out that hashtag and see everything that's been posted.
Great, thank you, Chloe. The next question here is directed towards Alex. It says, I'm curious about how the lakefront connection aspect of the Riverwalk plan. Will the path connect with a particular location? For example, the lakefront path or a particular park, etc.?
Yeah, good question, Casey. For that, so the renderings show a ramp going down from Columbus Drive. So that'll be a new ramp that will be built in that connects to the Riverwalk, the existing Riverwalk. And then from there, the path will take you to the lakefront. So it's not a new path that will be built. It's creating the downward ramp from Columbus Drive to the Riverwalk that will connect you to the lakefront path.
Great. And this next one I think is also for Alex.
Yep.
It says, can the details of the lunch meeting on Monday, 9/13 in Bridgeport be repeated?
So the event is going to be in person. It will be a lunch event at the Bridge House Museum along the river, not in Bridgeport. Sorry for the confusion, but it is at the Bridge House Museum, and it will be in person.
Thank you. Okay. This next one says, are efforts being made to develop minority businesses as part of the river development? This might be a good one for Carson.
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, we're trying to think about riverfront improvements and how they can create spillover benefits to our business district, including Lawrence Avenue, parts of Kedzie, these things that are walking distance. Our riverfront is almost all parks. There are sections in Ravenswood Manor, which are private homes, and then parts of the North Branch, which include like the riverfront for North Park University, and then a few private homes as well. But almost all of the riverfront in our service area is parks. So again, we're trying to think about how we can create more amenities that bring people to the neighborhood and then create those spillover benefits. But we have been thinking about like, public markets, events in the parks that local businesses participate in. Most of our local businesses are minority owned. Albany Park is a majority Latinx community, but as many people know, is incredibly diverse. And that's reflected really well in the business ownership in the community. So we are thinking about ways. It's been really hard over the past year and a half to bring businesses out for events. It's just been a struggle. People have been sort of holding on to their brick and mortar, and it's hard for them to participate outside their own four walls. So in the future, we are definitely thinking about opportunities to bring businesses into the parks and into the riverfront to create more of that connective tissue.
Great, thanks so much. Our next question is for Alex. And it says, was there an opportunity to survey businesses and their employees along Upper Wacker and or the riverfront to understand their interests or provide input to shape the project?
So there wasn't a survey done for this. What we did was have an advisory committee. So the advisory committee consisted of downtown businesses and downtown organizations that were involved with the engagement process, making sure that we got their input and feedback on what they think about this project. So there wasn't a survey, but we do have stakeholders who are businesses and organizations in downtown that were participating in this.
Great, thank you. The next one I think I'm gonna pose to everybody. It says, please describe the timeline and journey from idea to implementation. What are key components to getting a project completed? What helps them move more easily? What are some obstacles? And I will generally put that out there for whoever would like to answer. Maybe we could start with Carson.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Again, we were really kicking this project off. We got the funding in May of last year. So right, at the early height of the pandemic. And so, we started trying to do surveying and community engagement and talking to stakeholders and partners, which was a challenge, but we were able to get a survey launched that had over 200 respondents. And we were asking, questions about what people thought about the immediate, the project area, how they enjoyed it. So we weren't coming at this from like a deficit perspective, but we knew that Ronan Park and obviously the Global Garden, Refugee Training Farm, and the Community Garden, they're already assets in the community, but they're assets that we wanted to improve. So we wanted to know, what did people like about it already? What do they want to see changed? What kinds of programs or events or improvements do they want? So we were able to do some of that. We were able to hold an event at Ronan Park to talk to people, to show them some early concepts for improvements to the bike trail, improvements to the farm, improvements to the park for community gathering. And again, building on some of the priorities that were established in our comprehensive plan. We used a steering committee model. So we had, other nonprofit organization partners like Friends of the River. The Park District was involved in this from the beginning, and they were a super great partner, as well as Neighbor Space and Global Garden Refugee Training Farm. So having those stakeholders involved early on and consistently was super helpful to developing the idea further. And then implementation, we kind of got lucky that there just happened to be some funding available from the city that the Park District put in for, and we're moving hopefully towards implementation over the next year and a half, 2 years. And we're going to maintain, our steering committee, our direct partnership with people who are stakeholders on site, as well as members of the community, local businesses, schools. And I do think that having everybody involved and making sure that everybody is up to speed and on board and nobody's surprised by anything has been helpful to move through obstacles, as they've come up.
Yeah, I would add from just a broader perspective of the support that we've provided for projects throughout the years, that really the planning phase is the part that gets overlooked the most as far as funding and grants, which was part of the reason why it was so great and pivotal to see this funding for community-led projects from the Chicago Community Trust that was focusing on like knowing that these projects are going to be startups and focusing on those early pieces of planning. And so I think we saw, especially in the early years, 2017, 2018, a lot of projects that really did just start as someone saying, I have kind of this idea, not really sure where to take it, not really sure who I should even talk to or link up with. And we've seen that evolution of implementation happen just through even partnerships that were able to happen with the cohort. So I know I just saw another question coming in about collaborations between all of these different river projects. Active Transportation Alliance and MPC and South Branch Parks Advisory Council have partnered a bunch on South Branch work. I know that Current and is partnering with pretty much everybody. I know that Open Lands and the Forest Preserves and MPC and Storm Store and OAI are all collaborating on a number of projects. So there really has been a lot of cross-pollination that's just made all of our projects stronger throughout this process.
Again, one more shout out to Perkins and Will and Omni too, having these two pro bono partners to help, develop the drawings and the renderings and to facilitate meetings. NRC is a small team, small but mighty, but it was very helpful that MPC was able to make the connection for us with Perkins and Will and Omni to both develop, renderings and concepts, but also the story map itself. Just totally invaluable.
Great, thank you. I think we have 2 more minutes and 2 more questions. The first one is for Alex. The question is, are the traffic lights going to be changed to manage safe bicycle passage?
So for that question, there would be part of the design concepts is to add new lights that include bicycle. So pretty much it would give the first right of way to the bicycles to start once the light turns green, and then the regular traffic light to cars would turn green after. So it'll pretty much give a prioritization to bicycles when the light turns green.
Thank you. And then finally, this is a question for Carson. How do you balance the interests of community residents and those of local business owners when there may be conflicting goals or visions of how to proceed in the projects or prioritize what happens?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question in general. We saw last year with things like expanded outdoor dining, restaurants really were looking for that opportunity to do something that was going to allow them to bring customers in, but sometimes neighbors, didn't want to give up parking or didn't want outdoor seating, loud settings, right, in their neighborhood, that it was going to change how it used to be. So we just look for, points of compromise, places, interventions that achieve or that drive towards multiple priorities. And it's definitely not easy, but we know that everybody at the end of the day wants a thriving, safe community. And so if we can find where goals overlap between residents and businesses, if there are differences in what they want to see in their vision, we drive towards those, and just make sure that we're listening, that people are along for the ride, that nobody's surprised by anything. So just trying to be out in the community, talking to people as much as possible in multiple modes, in multiple languages, just to make sure that we're hearing from as many people as possible.
Great, thank you. We actually have a few more questions, but I think we might, I think we need to pass it over to Chloe to wrap up. And I've copied the questions, and maybe we can get answers out afterwards. So I'm handing it over to Chloe now.
Great, thanks, Lauren. Yeah, with those outstanding questions, we definitely, I think we'll try to answer some of those in our communication that goes out after the event. But I want to thank our expert panelists and moderators for being with us today and your remarks, for your leadership in engagement, planning, riverfront development, equity, all of that that we saw come through in our discussion today. Thank you to all of our audience members who tuned in to learn about all of our story maps and tools and the initiatives that are making up all of this Great River Chicago initiative. So a final reminder that the link with the recording from today will be sent out and circulated in the next few days. We'll include some of the resources that we talked about, potentially a few answers to questions that might not have been answered today. So feel free to look up all of our organizations and reach out to all of us as well if you're interested in learning more and getting involved. And thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.